Hello, hello. Welcome to the Global Citizen Therapy Podcast, the podcast for women of color who are daughters of immigrants to feel seen, heard, and validated. My name is Nancy Diaz, and I am a trauma-informed therapist, speaker, and your podcast host today. And now, let's jump into today's episode. All right, let's get into this. Today, we're talking all about consent. And as I say that, I want to encourage you to actually reflect on how do you feel when I say the word consent? I feel like it can go one of two ways, right? I feel like there's a lot of people, including women, who kind of get like frustrated and annoyed and kind of like, oh, this topic again. Like, yeah, we get it. And, but definitely men, after the whole Me Too movement happened, there's a lot of people kind of, encouraging all of us to think of consent as a chore, as something that's really so tedious, so time consuming, so over talked about, and this is, I think, the problem, right? That we're supposed to think that oh, consent, 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 like, oh, it's been, overdone and all these things. And if you're not thinking any of this, then good for you, because I think that this is a big problem, right? No, I decided that I'm going to do an episode about consent because one thing that I know is that I did not learn in school about what consent is, what it should look like. I didn't learn about consent from my parents or from anyone. So I just had to learn all this on my own. And so I wanted to definitely do an episode because I think that, this podcast is for women of color who are daughters of immigrants. And of course, that, covers different cultures, covers people living in different countries, and covers people, in um different levels of their healing journey, right? And so some people might come in with a lot of, education around this, and some of people may not have any education. But we're going to err on the side of caution and assume that no one has ever talked to you about this, same as me, like just didn't really get any of this education and maybe still even are not really sure what is okay and what isn't okay when it comes to anything. Even like we're going to go like even with kissing, like let's start there. Let's start with the very basics, right, of kissing. I mean, should someone ask you, is it okay to kiss you? Should someone ask you, is it okay to touch your shoulder, to touch your back? Yeah, I think that's the basics of consent, right? And I have to admit that this is something that like not even that long ago, I also kind of was like, oh, like maybe people are taking it a little bit too far. Like, no, you do want it to be like, heat of the moment, like just passionately grab you and kiss you. Like, no, I think asking for permission to kiss you kind of kills the moment, right? Kills all of it, right? But, it is a slippery slope, right? Because if we're kind of saying, oh no, they should just go for it and they should just kiss you, then are we then supposed to stop and say, no, 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 but for sex, like that's different, right? And of course, when we're talking about sex, there's it's not just penetrative sex, right? So we have to kind of let's zoom out first and talk about this. I think that people should ask, can I kiss you? Can I touch you on the shoulder? Can I hold your hand? Everything. Here's why. As a therapist, I have a different perspective on this, but I'll share with you that, I have a lot of clients who come to me and who have sexual trauma. But here's the kicker. They may not even realize that it is sexual trauma. They may not even realize that what happened to them was sexual assault. They may not realize that something bad happened to them. They may not realize that this is why they're maybe struggling, in their present day-to-day lives, or that they're struggling in relationships. Sometimes something like this happens and you kind of minimize it because unfortunately it is something that is so common, right? And you hear of this happening to other friends. You see this maybe even in movies. I'll share that I actually was watching Gossip Girl as it just came on Australian Netflix. What was it, a couple weeks ago or something? And I saw that and I just thought, wow, how funny that as soon as I start, this season of the podcast, which is all about sex, sexuality, sexual health, all of it related to mental health, right? As soon as I start this season, Gossip Girl is back on. And for me, Gossip Girl is a funny one because that's actually the first show that I remember watching and actually seeing like sex scenes. Obviously it's not, you don't see everything, but for someone who grew up in a very strict religious household where any kind of scene where there is kissing, making out, like anything that's going to lead to sex, that was always something that my parents would immediately like change the channel. So I don't even remember. I think Gossip Girl would come on when I would get out of school. I must have been in middle school. Yeah, I think around there, maybe like seventh or eighth grade. And yeah, I was like, okay, wow, this is interesting, like this, so this is what it's supposed to be like it's very like hot and heavy, and it's supposed to be like, yeah, very spontaneous. And so it's interesting that now watching it years later, I just watched the first episode and I don't even think I finished the whole episode because I actually noticed like right away, if you watch the first episode, and I actually was saying this to a friend, like, because we were talking about like, oh yeah, she was also like watching Gossip Girl now that it's on Netflix again. And I said, yeah, but how crazy, that the first like episode, like one of the first scenes, it starts with a sexual assault. And I can see that she had to think about it, right? And see how interesting is that we don't even really think of it in those terms, right? But what happened to Serena with Chuck, that was sexual assault, right? She was saying, no, stop, get off, I don't want this. And it wasn't rape because he wasn't successful, right? I think she got an elbow in or somehow like pushed him off and was able to run away and get away from him. But even if you think about like, and that's why I didn't want to continue rewatching the series, because I remember thinking like Gossip Girl like made sex finally be something that I wanted to do, that I wanted to have, because they made it look so fun and they made it look so good. And, like, oh, if these popular, pretty, Upper East Side girls are doing it, like I should want to do it as well, right? So I remember that that was kind of the show for me, right? But interesting that now rewatching it, I was like, oh God, no, I don't want to rewatch this show because now all I'm going to be thinking about is, oh, like Serena, like now has to continue to go to school with this guy, who sexually assaulted her on the first day that she came back, and yeah, and unfortunately, like if we do like continue to see that series and we continue to see these shows where it just becomes so normalized, right, where we just, instead of, you could see right in the show that she doesn't stop to process it, she doesn't stop to report it, she doesn't stop to think this was sexual assault, this is sexual trauma, like this may impact my future relationships or how I perceive men or how I perceive sex, because yeah, having an experience like that definitely does something to you where all of a sudden you might think, oh wow, like men just take what they want, or you might come up with different limiting beliefs or different even problematic beliefs, such as, I have to always be alert, or, it was my fault, like I led him on, for example, like that might actually be something that she's thinking, right? Because in the scene, she wanted a sandwich or something. She was hungry, right? And she wanted, what was it, a toasty or something, like a, oh God, what do Americans call it? I don't even remember. Just know in Australia they call it toasties, a ham and cheese something, right? And the bar, they wouldn't make it for her. So he said, oh, I know the chef, I'll go get it for you, right? So he did her a favor. So she might also even be thinking, oh, well, maybe it's my fault because I asked for this favor. He gave me that favor. Maybe I kind of owe him something. So even though I think she knew that what happened was wrong and that he should have stopped, but still, she didn't report it. She didn't tell anyone about it. Life goes on, the show goes on, right? And so here's the thing, that's actually very problematic because he did not get consent from her, right? To kiss her or, to do anything. And when she was saying stop and he didn't stop, yeah, that's sexual assault. And just because it's not completed rape and she got away and she was able to go on with her life as it and just forget it, put it past her behind her, and she still had to interact with him, throughout the whole series, right? Like they're all friend the part of this friend group or whatever, their families know each other all right. So she has to continue to interact with him. So yeah, we often don't even think of things like this as sexual assault when in reality they are. And in reality, these are things that we should be processing, with a professional. Because, yeah, same thing when you're in a relationship, you might think, oh, well, there was that one time that I didn't want to have sex or I didn't want to do whatever it was. And I just, I said no, but it ended up happening anyway. But you might be thinking, oh, but we're in a relationship. Oh, but we're married. So, it's not rape, it's not sexual assault. When in reality, I'm here to tell you that you definitely can experience sexual assault and rape, even if you're in a relationship and even if you're married. That's still exactly what it is. Nothing changes. You have a right over your body, and you have every right to say no. You have every right to say, no, you know what? I'm not in the mood. No, I don't feel like having sex. I don't feel like kissing. And you can give that if you want to, you can give, that option of, okay, do you want to give that person, partner, or whoever, give them the opportunity to turn you on to get you in the mood? Or do you not? Like you're just not feeling it. Like you're just, no, you don't want that. That's your choice. You have that right to decide that, right? So yeah, it does start, kind of small with like, okay, can I kiss you? Can I go further? Yeah. And I think I love the definition of consent that defines it as it's an enthusiastic yes. You know what I mean? It's not a coerced kind of yes. It's not like you had to convince someone, you had to work really hard and wear them down to get that yes, because that's not okay either, right? That's not right. And if you even think about that song, God, what's that Christmas song of where she's going out into the snow and he's saying like no, like please don't go, and the whole song he's trying to convince her to stay, right? And there's this whole controversy of oh, but I think she wants it too, she sounds kind of like she's teasing, and by the end of it, finally she laughs and said like, okay, I guess I'll stay the night, and things like that. So yeah, I've listened to that song a few times and I've heard it both ways. I've kind of heard it like, yeah, she is kind of like she does have a bit of a playful tone, like maybe she is kind of enjoying the chase and the whole time she knows that she's gonna end up staying, and that's okay, like if you enjoy the chase, then great. If you kind of both know, and I think that this is something that's great to do when you're in a relationship and you both have kind of established that yes, you like the chase, or yes, you like the tease, or whatever it is, you like this, you like that. But when you're meeting someone for the first time and it's the initial interaction, then I think consent really, like, you don't know this person. So you should be, asking like, hey, is this okay? Is this not okay? And yeah, and I think that this goes, for women as well, because I think that so many times we expect men to make the first move, in heterosexual relationships and encounters. And yeah, it's not always the case. There are cases where, if you feel like you want to make the first move, then you should make the first move. But, we shouldn't be doing the same thing that men do and just going for it. We should also, try to make sure. And this is something that I'm still learning. Like I'm right there with you if you're still kind of figuring out how to navigate all this. And yeah, I made this mistake in the past where I'm, yeah, not really asking for that permission, to kiss someone or whatever, assuming that the other person wants this. So I think it goes both ways, like making sure that both people are into it and that there isn't one person that is feeling pressured, you know? So yeah, definitely a learning curve. And definitely, there's more information coming out. There's more examples of this, in the media and in shows nowadays. But still, I think that there could definitely be more conversations about this in school and just even role play activities and just more conversations about this with our friends and, like, is this okay? Or, what do you think? And all these things. But I think that this is kind of where, professionals come in as well. And I think I love, that there's sexologists and there's like here in Australia, like I went to a sexual health center as well, and they do education and things like this as well. So going to people, who this is kind of their bread and their butter, and they know about this, that can be really helpful. Asking like, is this okay or is this not? If you're not sure, asking questions, because sometimes we might ask our friends, and they might also have grown up thinking, that yeah, you should just let the guy kiss you first without asking, and yeah, but you might have had like a really terrible experience because, yeah, even if we're talking about just a kiss, that, yeah, that could go wrong as well. And that could be something that, like could be a very aggressive kiss. It could just be, like at the wrong moment, like I know for me, like if a guy had kissed me when I was in front of my parents and I was younger and that wasn't allowed, like I would have been like furious and that would have been traumatic for me, and that would have felt like very much like, whoa, like that was out of line. Like that's not the same as if you and I are alone. But if you all of a sudden kiss me, in church or in front of my parents or, something, like there's all these situations, there's all these things, layers, and people are complex and we have to think about so many other things, right? So consent, very important. We've talked about consent, we've talked about sexual assault, we've talked a little bit about sexual trauma. I will just kind of briefly mention as well that if you think that you might have sexual trauma, I think odds are that you probably do. And I think that, going back to what are some of the things that I think or believe about sexual assault, about rape, about sexual trauma that maybe are stopping me from getting help, from reaching out, from telling people about this. And like zooming out, talking to someone who can actually look at it from an outside perspective, who's actually trained in helping people with this, that can be really helpful because oftentimes you don't know what it is that you don't know. So, yeah, I think that if you think that you might have sexual trauma, then go and talk to a professional about it because, yes, there are all different types of sexual assault. There is all different types of sexual trauma. And as we know with trauma, sometimes our brain blocks it out to try to protect us. And so we may not even know what's there. But unfortunately, we know that, 1 in 4 women has experienced sexual assault or rape. 1 in 4 has been in an abusive relationship. And within an abusive relationship, within, definitions of domestic violence, also includes, sexual violence. So, yes, there's all kinds of things, right? And just to clarify, you can be in an abusive relationship and you can have experienced domestic violence even if there was no sexual assault or sexual violence. But of course, you could also be in a relationship where there's only been sexual assault and sexual violence and not the other types of, for example, physical violence or emotional or psychological violence or financial abuse or things like that. So there's all types of different domestic violence, right? So just to clarify. But yes, point being that the stats show us that there are a lot of women that experience this. So if you think that you've experienced sexual trauma or sexual assault, talk to someone about it, because odds are that if you think you may have experienced it, you probably have. Unfortunately, in today's society, these things are just way too normalized. I mean, the fact that we see this in Gossip Girl and don't think twice about it, that's the huge, huge problem, you know? And that's exactly what we're seeing in so many movies, you know, where the girl is just like, no, pushing him off, right? How often do we see that in movies and TV shows, right? The girl is pushing the guy off but she gets away, right? Because we hardly ever see, you know, the actual rape completed. And she pushes him away and that's it. And how many times has it happened to you? I know it's happened to me that at the club, be dancing. This happened actually way more in the US than it's happened in Australia. So cultural differences, you know, but all the time in the US, you be dancing and all of a sudden there's a guy dancing behind you, sometimes even almost on top of you. And when you say like, hey, no, I'm not interested, or you try to get away, they follow you or whatever it is, right? So consent, even, can I dance with you? Yeah, especially if someone has experienced sexual assault or sexual trauma and it's very present, something like this might trigger them. So that's why it's important for us to think about not just ourselves, like, okay, maybe you are one of the lucky ones who has not experienced sexual assault, sexual violence, but still, consent is very important because you don't know what anyone else has been through. You don't know what a touch can do to them, right? And I'll also say that you can have experienced sexual assault and sexual trauma and not be presenting it in a very obvious way. You know, I think in grad school, you know, we learn about like, what are the signs, you know? How do you know if a child has, you know, usually we talk about children in these cases. Interesting, right? That we actually learn about how do you tell if a child has been sexually abused, maybe experiencing sexual violence where they live, that kind of thing. We don't really talk about how to identify that with adults. Interesting. Anyway, we'll table that for now, but yeah, usually what we learn is that, yes, there are signs, you know, with kids, they might be, you know, touching themselves more than average, you know, than the average kid, right? Or they might be, you know, very flighty and very responsive to any kind of touch. You know, if you touch their hand or you touch their head or whatever, and they might just snap at you or they might just run away or burst into tears. So we kind of think in our society, I think in general, right? We think that someone who's experienced rape or sexual trauma or sexual assault or any kind, we think that they're supposed to present in this certain way, right? We think that if you've experienced sexual trauma, then that automatically means that you will have trouble, you know, having sex because it won't feel safe to you. Or you might think that, yeah, that if someone touches you or kisses you, that you're going to feel uncomfortable. But that's not the case, I think, for most people. I think, again, unfortunately, because it's become something that's so normalized and we often don't even realize that we've experienced sexual trauma, we might push that down all the way down, forget that it's even there, not even know what it is, and just go on with our day to day lives. And it's only until we kind of come into a safe space, you know, and can open up to someone who actually sees us and who actually is there for us and can actually hold space for us, that we can say, oh, okay, this is something that I've experienced. And hopefully you're talking to someone who can get you the help that it is that you deserve. Because again, it's not about, do you need help? Do you need support? It's about, do you deserve help? And I think that everyone is deserving of help, of support. Everyone is deserving of therapy. So, and of healing. So, yeah, it starts with just acknowledging that maybe something has happened to you. And again, unfortunately, so many women, you know, have experienced something like this in childhood and then in adulthood, and maybe multiple times across adulthood and childhood. So yeah, today, very heavy topic, but and if we look at kind of what's going on in our cultures, in our parents' cultures, we're not talking about this enough, are we? We're just unfortunately not talking about this enough. And if you even think about, like, for example, in Latino culture, and I know that this is, the same in so many other cultures, that it's kind of a joke of, if you grow up ethnic, quote unquote ethnic, then you know that because you have such a giant family, you're taught from a very young age that you always have to say hello and goodbye to your elders, especially to the aunties and the uncles and everyone, with maybe a kiss on the cheek, with a hug. You're supposed to let them pinch your cheeks or hug you or carry you, or pretty much you're supposed to let them do what they want to you, right? Because otherwise you are a rude, ungrateful, and spoiled brat of a child, right? So that's the kind of thinking that I grew up with, definitely. And I'm a bit introverted. I actually realized this week, I just came back from a 5-day speaker training, and woo, that was, I mean, we got there, a day before, and we stayed like a day after the training as well. So it was like well, 7 days where I was around people and couldn't get away from people. Yeah, so I had no downtime from away from people, and I realized, like, wow, nothing against the amazing people that I'm meeting, um and the amazing people who hosted me and let me stay with them, but I just really am not the type of person that enjoys being around people 24/7, right? So as a kid, I definitely did not want to be around all of the family members all the time. And I definitely did not. As a kid, like, yeah, I liked running around playing with my cousins and whatever. But it was, getting there, saying the hello to everyone and saying the goodbyes at the end to everyone, that I was like, I I do not want to do the hug and the kiss with everyone. I like my own personal space, my bubble. But of course, right away I learned that I had to do it. And so, yeah, I couldn't express any boundaries, right? I couldn't say no. So you take that kind of thinking with you into adulthood, into relationships, into encounters, hookups, and you still have some of that with you, thinking like, no, I can't say no. I don't want to hurt their feelings, right? I mean, this is something that I'm still working on unlearning, right? Because so long we're taught, right, in this patriarchy, that we should always make sure that we don't hurt the guy's feelings, right? And so pushing them away, saying no to a kiss, like even the way that we say no, unfortunately, we have to be very careful with the way that we say no oftentimes, right? Because we never know when that person is going to get aggressive, get violent, and it could turn into something like sexual assault. So, yes, very heavy topic today. I really wanted to cover this, even if it is a heavy topic, because I know that so many of us have not learned this, and we need to. We need to recognize that there may have been sexual assault. We need to learn to recognize when it's happening, so that if we see this happening to a friend or a family member, or even to a random woman at the club, on the street, we can call it out for what it is and say, hey, that's not okay. That is not okay. And, not minimizing it with the woman. If you do, say like, hey, and you get the guy, usually a guy, right, to back away. But then, instead of just trying to distract your friend or whoever it is and saying like, oh, don't worry about that. Let's go get a drink. Instead of doing that, actually checking in and saying, hey, that looked really scary. Like, do you have someone that you can talk to? Like, don't minimize it. Just make sure that the person has the resources and support that they need. They have someone that they can talk to. This is a really tricky one. Do you actually say that was sexual assault, or do you not? One good example of this, if you've ever watched Sex Education on Netflix, super funny show, right? That's exactly what was done in that show, right? Even if you think about this example, right? The girls on the bus. It's been a while since I watched the show, so sorry I don't remember the character names, but actually I think they're coming up with a new season soon, I think in September. So that should be fun. But yeah, girls on the bus, right? And there's a guy jerking off. All of a sudden, jizz is on her pants, on her jeans. And her initial reaction was to just say, oh, well, these were my favorite jeans. Like, oh, but oh, that's all right. Like he can't control himself. He didn't mean any harm. That's what she says to her friend. But her friend, being a badass little feminist high schooler, says, no, that's not okay. No, he can't control himself. No, that's disgusting. He shouldn't be doing that on the bus. And he shouldn't have done that to you. That's sexual assault. And you can report him for that. And you should report him for that. And then to see that transition, that transformation with that girl, that all of a sudden she felt empowered, right? And this girl got her to a therapist, helped her process it, got her the resources so that she could help her process what had happened to her. And then after she had processed it, she was able to come to that decision of, yeah, you know what, I do want to report this guy. And actually then going full blown in the other way of like, I'm going to learn all about these things, and I'm going to, start teaching other girls about like, hey, like these things are not okay. So yeah, sometimes calling it out for what it is and telling a friend like, hey, no, that's actually sexual assault. Like that's not right. Like, hey, you can report this. That can be really empowering for people. You have to kind of, feel out the room, and decide like, can this person actually handle being told that this is what it was? Or do you get them the resources and help and follow up with them later, So yes, it can be super empowering to learn about consent, to learn about what is sexual assault, what isn't. Like, I've been on this journey for a few years now, and I'm still learning, I think, every day. And, I see these, shows where they're just like empowering women, and just, it's amazing, right? So, yeah, I'm glad that I actually thought of that story, because I like to end it on a lighthearted kind of positive, uplifting vibe, because yes, this can be something really heavy, and it can be definitely something hard that we experience as women. But on the bright side, I think there's more and more of us who are learning about this, becoming empowered, and empowering others. So, yes, if you take away anything from this episode, just please learn to recognize what sexual assault is, how to actually get people the help and resources that they need, and start to call that shit out when it's safe, when it's possible, so that you can start to be the change. Cliche and cheesy as it sounds, be the change that you want to see in the world, right? It is, there's a lot of bad people out there in the world, but at the same time, there's a lot of good people in the world out there. People who are actually helping, doing the damn thing to make sure that women, that young girls are safe, that they're healing. I mean, this is what the whole podcast is about, right? It's helping women of color who are daughters of immigrants feel seen, heard, and validated, helping you. We're healing in community, right? You might think, I'm just listening to this, I'm on my own, I don't know. No, you're not alone. If you need help, I'm here. You can schedule a consultation call with me. But also, you're not alone, because I know that clients are talking to me about these things. These are things that I've experienced. These are things that my friends have experienced. You're not alone in this. We're all healing together, right? We're all entering our healing eras. It's amazing. So yes, I will leave it there for now. But yeah, tune in next week. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. As always, I am here to be open, honest, and vulnerable with you, because you are not alone. If you want to support this podcast, please make sure to leave a review so others can find it as well. If you're interested in working with me, you can find me at www.globalcitizentherapy.com. And if you'd like to heal your relationship with self-care and learn more about how to find the type of soul care that works for you, you can find the link to my workshop in the description of this podcast episode. Thank you again, and see you next time.